It's going really well. It came out in May in British Columbia, and it came out in November in the United States, and I think February in England. Um, and it did. I think since May, it's been on the BC bestseller list for 25 weeks. 22 continuous weeks, and it keeps popping back up every now and then. So it's doing really well. It covers a lot of ground. It tells the story about one particular dog, but I have a dozen co-authors who are Coast Salish people, and they contributed illustrations, oral history, writings, memories about the Coast Salish woolly dog. And so their contributions really put the woolly dog in the woolly dog whose name is Mutton, the only known example that we know of, except the Smithsonian. They put that particular dog in context with their culture. And because the stories about the woolly dog in the Coast Salish cultures range from the northern communities, Coast Salish communities, right through to the southern ends of Puget Sound, up the Fraser River, over to Vancouver Island. So it was widely known, and their contributions provide that context that you can start to understand why the woolly dog was so important and why weaving was so important. And it opens up a whole bunch of doors. At least I hope it does that. For people that are interested in reconciliation, for example. It's one way to learn about Coast Salish culture and the history and what colonization has done to the Coast Salish. And of course, everybody loves a good dog story, and this is a true dog story and a fascinating one. And it gets at some of the science to find out more. So the Coast Salish knowledge has been there all along, and the science is just sort of catching up. One thing that I found strange when I was reading about Coast Salish spinning and weaving was when blankets or other artifacts, textile artifacts, were collected in the 1800s, often the collector would say, this is a dog hair blanket, or it contains dog wool, something like that. And those notes went into the records of the museums or collections where that blanket it would end up. But somewhere in the 1900s, there was doubt about whether they really did contain dog wool. And so by doing the science on mutton, we were able to identify some of the genetics that could be used for looking at other bones and saying, are they Coast Salish woolly dogs? And also we used isotope analysis to find out what mutton's diet was compared to another dog collected around the same time. So the science comes through that too. And I think people, I hope, are interested by what that tells us and how it meshes nicely with the Indigenous knowledge. In terms of my position, I was Director of Research Services at Vancouver Island University, Malaspina College, and then Malaspina University College, and then Vancouver Island University. And my position there was not to do research, but to provide the support structure for researchers. So that could be money for building, property, equipment, research programs. So I didn't actually do research, but the people I worked with were passionate about their research. So they were really interesting. Every research project that they had was really interesting because they knew how to explain it in a way that was really interesting. So, and research is really just another way of asking questions. And that's a lot of fun. It's like a mystery, trying to find out the answers. But about 10 years before I was planning to retire, I thought, well, what am I going to do in retirement? And 20 years prior to that, I used to do spinning and weaving. And I thought, if I had kept it up, I'd probably be really good by now. It's a pity I didn't keep it up. And so then I started looking for programs that were done offered in a logical progression. So I found an agricultural college in Olds, Alberta, that offered a 6 or 7 year spinning program, and you could become a master spinner. And so you went for 1 week a year, and then you had spinning homework, and then you'd go back for the next year. But in the final year, you had to do a research project. So I decided to do Coast Salish spinning because I lived in Coast Salish territory. And they had some unique tools, techniques, and fiber, like dog wool, that they use. So I thought that'd be an interesting research project. Well, that was, I don't know how many years ago, 12, 13, 14 years ago. And I've never stopped. So that's how I learned about mutton and that he existed. And so I actually got to go visit him at the Smithsonian. But he could have remained in a drawer, sort of forgotten, had it not been for a woman by the name of Candace Wellman. And she says that she's just a housewife and an amateur archivist and historian. But she was researching women that had married some of the early settlers or government workers in the Bellingham, Northwest Washington State area. And one particular woman that she was researching, she couldn't find any information on her. So she started looking at her husband, because her husband had worked on the border survey, the 49th parallel, and he was the doctor. But he was also in charge of collecting specimens for the Smithsonian. And so she thought, well, if I read all his letters, maybe he mentions his wife and his son. And so she went to the Smithsonian and copied all his letters, because he was sending them to a good friend of his, who was the curator or the director at the Smithsonian in the 1850s. And they were good friends. And so she copied all his letters, brought them home, transcribed them. And one letter, written in August of 1859, so George Gibbs was at Camp Skagit, and somebody brought in a mountain goat specimen, so they were quite happy about that. And then during the night, Mutton, the dog, he was owned by George Gibbs. George Gibbs had acquired him at Chilliwack Depot, which is where downtown Chilliwack is now. So he had acquired this dog, Mutton. He knew it was a wool dog. Anyway, Mutton got out in the middle of the night and chewed the mountain goat skull. And Gibbs just packaged it all up and shipped the mountain goat skull to Dr. Keinerly. And Keinerly wrote to his friend at the Smithsonian saying, a mountain goat skin was brought to Camp Skagit, where George Gibbs took a hold of it. But most unfortunately, his famous dog, Mutton, got at it and ate the skull. You can imagine my dismay when I opened it up and saw the damage. Mutton is a Coast Salish Woolly Dog, so that's where we know the provenance of Mutton. And he has been sheared recently. As soon as his wool grows back out, we'll make a specimen of him. So that was written in this letter. And, when I read it and other people, think, did he really do that? Could they really bring themselves to slaughter a dog as a specimen? Anyway, she just filed that fact away in her mind and went on with her research. But she knew about woolly dogs, and she came across a report done by a zoologist at UVic who had studied thousands of bones, old bones, and had said, that it looks like there's two species of dogs that were here, a smaller species and a larger species. And I think the smaller one is the wool dogs, and the larger ones are the village or hunting dogs. And Candace went to bed that night. She woke up in the middle of the night and said, wait a minute, there is a specimen. They can compare, because up to that point they had thought there was no woolly dog in any museum. So she contacted the Smithsonian and says, where's Mutton? So eventually they found Mutton in a drawer, just sitting there. So she got to go out and visit him. And that was late 2000s, I think. So I got to visit Mutton a few years after that and take him out for some fresh air to have a look at him. So that's how I got into it, and that's how Mutton was rediscovered. And so then during, just before COVID, Audrey Lynn, who had just finished a PhD and had a fellowship at the Smithsonian, she was going to look at the evolution of bird flu virus. So she was going to look at, hundreds of different bird specimens, extract some DNA out of them, and find the bird flu DNA and see how it evolved over time. But within a month of getting at the Smithsonian, the Smithsonian was locked down because of COVID. So she thought, well, what am I going to do? And she happened to read an article online, the Hackeye magazine, which is published out of Victoria. It doesn't exist anymore, but their website is still up, and it has excellent articles. And as she's reading, it mentions that Mutton was at the American National Museum of Natural History. She thought, this is the very building that I'm in, so Mutton must be downstairs. So she went to her supervisor and said, how about we take a look at Mutton and look at his DNA? And so that started the science aspect of what Mutton could teach us.